So good afternoon and welcome to Rotary Club of Madison. I'm George Hidalgo, Club President, and thank you for joining us. Now, today's message on philanthropy is going to be more related to Rotarian helping Rotarian. So it focuses on technology today because obviously with the pandemic, we've had to learn a lot about technology, things that, for example, myself, I had never used Zoom before, had never used Microsoft Teams, I had used WebEx, but there's a lot of software out there that we're becoming more familiar with. So obviously, we've kind of learned to master it. So if you're watching us right now, congratulations, because you figured out how to work the technology. However, we're hearing that there's a small group of Rotarians who aren't able to figure out how to watch us online. So let's call them technologically challenged. And you would say that that's insulting. No, it's not, because all of us have our strengths and weaknesses. And I'm pretty familiar with being technology challenged because I've been married for 39 years and my wife is definitely technologically challenged. So if I look at some examples, why would I say that about her? Okay, so I'll come home from work and she'll say to me, I've been trying to print out, these emails and my printer doesn't work. So what ends up happening is I start looking at why her, when she sends an email to the printer, why it's not printing. And then I'll find out when you look at the devices that for somehow she was managed to switch it from going to a printer to going to the fax. So obviously she's not able to print it out. So another example that's come up is she'll say, hey, I've been trying to send emails on my tablets and it just goes in the unsent folder. So I'll look at it, look at the settings and everything else. Says, oh, okay. Well, your connection to the wireless network is not on. So obviously you're working on your tablet. It's going to go ahead and stay there until you go ahead and do the connection. And I'll explain to her how to go ahead and look at it. And recently there was an interesting situation where a family member has sent me an email about something that was going on. And I said, well, let's forward it to her. And she didn't reply to it. And then all of a sudden that family member calls her and says, hey, I asked Dad, he sent you the information. How come you haven't responded? And when I get home, she says to me, hey, I hear that you're supposed to be sending emails and you haven't. Why didn't you tell me about these things? So I'll go ahead, I went ahead and looked at her system and I couldn't understand why I did send the email because I looked at my Google account. I did send the email to her and looked at the email account and found out that, it did go. So what's with her system? So I looked at her system and I clicked on the spam folder and sure enough, my email to my own wife was in the spam folder. So when I asked her, well, why did you put my emails in the spam folder? She said, well, didn't know I had. So I think what probably happened at one point, she got an email from me and she went to put the delete button instead of the delete button, put in spam, right? And it disappeared from her. And so she was upset because she hasn't been getting emails from me. And that's my own wife. So figure that one out, right? So, but it's, like I said, I love her. We've been married for 39 years and I love her pineapple upside down cake, which I can't do. All of us have our strengths and weaknesses, and she's technologically challenged. So that whole situation with her putting me into spam in a sense, and then I had to get myself out of it. There's probably some of our members are in the same situation where they're not getting our emails. It may be in spam folder. There may be other things that are going on. Probably pretty straightforward issues that someone with a little bit more technology expertise can help them out with. So I know I mentioned it once, and we have one person volunteer. But if you're willing to help contact one or two members to help them resolve any technology issues, or simply help them walk through the steps to click on the tab for our Wednesday email, to join our virtual meetings, or please, if you're available to help out a fellow Rotarian, can you have a little bit more technological expertise, please go ahead and let the Rotary office know. And we really like to get all our fellow Rotarians to be able to access our online meetings and all the information we can send them while we're not meeting in person. Obviously, a unique situation, and let's see what we can help how we can help our fellow Rotarians. Some of us know more technology than others, and so please, I had one person when I made the request last time that said, hey, I'm available to help, but would like to get some more. So please don't be bashful. You probably know, if you're on this virtual conference, you probably know a lot more about technology than other people. So thank you very much. So we'll open today's meeting with some music. Jeff and Angela Bartell will lead us in our patriotic song, You're a Grand Old Flag, followed by Heidi Frankson, who will sing Autumn Leaves with Jeff Bartell on piano and Heidi's husband, Mike Hackett, on trumpet. Let's take a listen. Well, thank you, Jeff, Angela, and Heidi Frankson and Mike Hackett for giving us some music today. It really does make this a little bit more fun, so thank you very much. Now, next announcement is past President Ellsworth Brown is chairing this year's community grant campaign, and today he will kick off the annual campaign. Ellsworth, tell us more about the campaign.
Thank you, George. And as you expect, I'm here to announce the annual campaign. for this club. It's actually been renamed the Community Grants Campaign because every cent that we raise is used to fund community grants that we consider in February and distribute in March to be spent throughout the rest of the year 2021. This, however, is not usual times, and the packet is straightforward. So let me talk about the context in which this is. I want to read you a very short diary entry by Samuel Pepys, written in 1665. He was a parliamentarian and a diarist, and he wrote that the taverns are fair full of gadabouts making merry this eve. Though I may press my face against the window like an urchin at a confectioner's, I am tempted not by the sweetmeats within. A dram in exchange for the pox is an ill bargain indeed. He was writing in 1665. The pox referred to what they called the Black Plague, or the Great Plague of London. It was what we call a pandemic, which is to say that nothing is actually new, including the circumstances we find ourselves in now. In fact, does this sound familiar? Regarding the London plague, which killed 1/4 of the city's population, city authorities reacted firmly and responsibly. The mayor ordered public prayers and days of confession, closure of public places like theaters and dancing houses, fires in the streets to purify the air, the killing of cats and dogs, which they believed were a cause of the plague, and indeed they were. It was actually the fleas on the cats and the dogs and the rats that were the carriers of the disease. Doctors were appointed to look after the poor. Houses where someone got the plague were shut up, actually boarded shut, people inside, and marked with a red cross. And on the door they wrote, "God have mercy upon us." Burial of the dead was in mass graves. And personally, people just stayed indoors, often out of fear. Many others fled to the countryside. Does this sound familiar? Doctors advised people to fumigate their homes and keep the windows closed. People refused to touch each other. Money was dropped into jars of vinegar to kill the germs, they thought, on the vinegar. People carried bottles of perfume to dab on their face and around the noses. They also carried a small trunk of smelly flowers that they thought with a good smell might ward away whatever it was that was causing this plague. That actually gave rise to the corsage called a nosegay now. And there were cures for the plague that they tried. They didn't work, but they thought they might. One of them was writing the letters abracadabra, written in a triangle, a lucky rabbit's foot, yes, dried toads and leeches. And I think most adventurous of all, but least successful perhaps, was pressing a plucked chicken against the plague sores until the chicken died. I presume the person also did sooner than later. Now, if this sounds humorous or perhaps just quaint, think about it. We still have no cure for the plague. We're still looking for it. We still have no easy way to stop its spread or to deal with the threat that we all face. Things aren't that much different now, and in fact, society is so far more complex that the impact on us is even greater. This time, the pandemic has also been made even more dramatic and more difficult by several other collisions that we face at the same time. We face, for example, the economic collapse that surrounds this pandemic. We face the challenges for education of our children, and we face the difficulty of a divided country at a time of election, and not to mention the climate change that we face. My brother, in fact, and his family had to evacuate their homes in California. They didn't lose it. They moved to camp in Oregon until they could move back home, only to be chased out of the state by the fires there into Idaho. So we're still dealing with the kinds of needs that were cataloged by Charles Tubbs and Joe Parisi a few weeks ago. And this is the context in which this campaign for our community grants has to be waged this year. The needs are overwhelming. We need to be an anchor. We think of ourselves as an anchor for children and by extension their families. We think of ourselves as a responsible organization. We are indeed. And when February comes and the Community Grants Committee begins to consider where it might place its money, the expectation is that we will have a better understanding and can focus more on those areas that are most of desperate need. And so when you give in this campaign, which runs until mid-January, remember that and see if you can't stretch. An incremental increase will make us exceed our goal, and I hope we will. We had to lower it to 110,000 from the goal last year, which was close to 150, partly because, as we've explained, there are people within our club who are also challenged by this pandemic and the economic effects of it, the personal effects of it as well. And we also have understanding of the people who are not able to conduct their business in the same manner in which they did. We have a number of nonprofit members whose organizations are touched by this. We have a number of single consultants whose business might be affected. So we have lowered the goal, though I think that if you are generous, make an incremental increase when you can, we should be able to exceed our goal. I hope we will, and I'll be coming to you weekly in order to make sure that you understand where we are. We'll be running a scroll before the meeting happens on the screen with those who have given, not the amounts, but just to say, these are the people who are in at this point in time. It's the sort of online version of stand up and be counted, as we do at Rotary meetings when we're meeting together. So please take a look at your form. You can give by calling the office and giving them a credit card number, mailing a check. There'll be a link to click to the ability to use your credit card and PayPal, which actually is a route to the credit card if you don't use PayPal itself. And you can make a gift that way online. So we're looking forward to your contribution. We hope you'll give it every consideration in a context that by February we'll be able to reassess in terms of the most pressing needs and be able to address to the degree that we're capable of doing that. Every penny that we raise in this campaign will go to community grants. So thank you very much. I'll be joining you next week, and we'll begin a series of videos, which we've gathered, 2-minute videos from various organizations that tell us about what they do, and in many cases, what they actually have adjusted in order to continue doing what they need to do. And we'll give you a link to those if you aren't watching live, and you'll be able to see them then. So thank you for considering it. I look forward to seeing the results, and we'll be back in touch next week.
Thank you, Ellsworth. And we are pleased to report that 100% of our club board members and officers have already made a donation, and we have raised just over $13,000 in our first week of the campaign. So we look forward to hearing an update from Ellsworth next week. And I want to thank the board personally, because I think when you're a leader, when you're leaders, you have to set the example for the rest of the club. And thank you, all board members and officers who have contributed. Thank you very much. So on to director nominations. So 12 members serve 2-year staggered terms on our club board of directors, with 6 members elected annually. The immediate past president also serves a 1-year term. So I'd like to introduce our current board members. So showing on the screen are Joyce Bromley, Mark Clare, Sarah Detienne, Steve Elke, Paul Hoffman, Teresa Holmes, Andrea Kaminsky in her role as immediate past president, Haley Salsa Miller, Mark Moody, Mary O'Brien, Lee Richardson, Lynn Sexton, and Cheryl Whitkey. Let's give them a round of applause. So as I mentioned, our board has 2-year staggered terms. So Joyce, Sarah, Paul, Teresa, Angela, Haley, and Lynn will be going off the board on June 30th. We now begin the process to elect 6 new board members to replace those outgoing board members. The nominating committee reviewed 50 names, and I'm pleased to introduce 12 nominees. The following members have agreed to place their name in nomination. So Deb Archer, Brian Baskin, Herman Bauman, Sandy Geller, Jenny Jeffries, Anita Mohammed, Charles McLymans, Valerie Rank, Jen Savino, Scott Strong, Martha Sullivan, and Rob Vandenberg. So on November 11th, the membership will select 6 of these leaders to join the board for a 2-year term beginning next July 1st. The 12 nominees represent the future leaders of our club, and any combination of these will serve our club well for the next 2 years. Now, because of the pandemic, our club board adopted an emergency resolution to allow for our election to be held electronically. Again, a good reason why we need to help our fellow members stay technologically connected. We'll be sending an email to all members on November 11th, and members will need to click on the link and complete the ballot by noon the next day. We will also send the ballot out to any member without an email 10 days before the election, so they have sufficient time to get the ballot back to us. Now, our club bylaws also provide the possibility of additional nominations. Any 20 voting members may nominate additional candidates. So additional nominations must be submitted in writing and filed with Pat Jenkins in the Rotary office by Wednesday, October 28th. Thanks again to the 12 nominees who have agreed to place their names in nomination this year. Let's give them a round of applause. Okay, one of the focus of our member development committee is to continue to be on the lookout for new members who are looking to connect, grow, and serve with us. Gina Stevens joined our club last year, and she serves on the membership recruitment subcommittee. Gina is going to tell us about her Rotary experience so far. Gina?
Hi, my name's Gina Stevens, and I am the owner and managing partner of Belwan Media. So why did I join Rotary? Well, I was invited to my very first Rotary meeting by Boris Frank. And anyone who knows Boris knows that if he invites you to a gathering, you go. So at my very first Rotary luncheon, lots of folks were saying, so are you gonna join Rotary? And I was thinking, I don't really know. But I tell you what, at that very first Rotary meeting, people were so friendly, very, very friendly, almost scarily friendly. But the thing that I noticed was that people were friendly. And I find that odd because a lot of times when I go to networking events, people don't talk to me. People don't talk to you. Even the people who invite you to the meeting, they kind of bring you along and they just kind of leave you hanging out there. They don't introduce you to people. And generally when I go to networking events, people are just kind of wandering around. Very few people come up and talk to you. But that wasn't the case at my very first Rotary meeting. People were very, very friendly. And so, yeah, I started considering it. And so once I joined Rotary, the friendliness continued. And, I got my little Rotary badge, my official Rotary member badge, put it on. And the thing I noticed is that people actually look at your name badge. They look at it and they make an effort to learn to pronounce your name. And that's very, very rare. People actually making an effort to learn how to pronounce your name. And they say, hi, you're Gina. And they actually want to talk to you. And they every meeting, they come up to me and they say, hey, you're new and what do you do? And they introduce themselves, they reach out and they shake your hand. I know we're in a pandemic, because this is before the pandemic, right? And people the friendliness continues. And that's one of the things that has never happened before at any networking group that I've ever belonged to, in any organization that I've ever been a member of. That's never happened. That's never happened for me. I don't know about the rest of you, but that's never happened for me, for any organization that I've ever belonged to. And so that's why I stay a member of Rotary, because it feels very sincere. I feel like I belong, and that's never happened for me before. And so I stay a member of Rotary. So I feel like Rotary is a place for me to truly connect with people. And it's a place for me to really grow professionally. And it's a place for me to really be an influence in my own community, because the people who are members of Rotary have been there for me when I call and I say, hey, it's Gina, or when I send an email and I say, hey, it's Gina, I'd love an opportunity to get together with you to talk about, maybe this project I'm working on. They say, okay, let's do that. So that's why I'm a member of Rotary, and that's why I'll stay a member of Rotary.
Thank you very much, Gina. Outstanding message. So as president, I get asked a lot of questions from members. Recently, someone asked me, hey, George, what is the deal with birthday gifts? Why am I asked to gift to our Madison Rotary Foundation for my birthday? Now, you've heard the answer because we've played this once before. We've gone through that question, but I think that we all need a little bit more historical information. So when we first started asking for birthday gifts, 75% of members participated. Last year, only 55% made a contribution on their birthdays. So we heard earlier from Ellsworth Brown about our community grants campaign, and that is the number one of the 4 priorities of giving for our members that you can see on the PowerPoint slide. Now you'll see the third item on the slide is the birthday gift. I've asked past President Melanie Ramey, who is the one who established the birthday giving campaign, and she will give us a response to the question about birthday gifts. Melanie, let's hear the background.
George, I'm really glad that someone asked about the birthday contribution, because it's really been an important institution in our club. Since I started it during my term as president, we have raised $563,528 and some change. Now, I have to tell you, when this got started, it was quite interesting. It actually turned out to be a lot of fun in the club. But when I introduced the idea, first of all, I think I had a petition. People were saying that this was taxation without representation. And of course, I did mention that there was quite a bit of difference between taxes and a contribution. Then a group got a court petition up that they were going to sue me on the basis of age discrimination. Because they were older, they would have to pay more, and this was a discrimination. And I responded that the court was full of frivolous lawsuits, of which this would be another. And besides that, it wasn't my fault that they were old. So we had all sorts of fun things week after week after week. But it became established as an institution because people saw this as another way that they could contribute to all of the good things we do in our club. So $500,000 is quite a lot of money. And in addition to that, when the Centennial Fund was started and then the subsequent Synergy Fund, the rounding up portion, your birthday amount plus rounding to 100, that section of the money was then donated to those 2 funds. So the birthday fund has really expanded. And I want to say that I think it's now more important than people even realize, because it was almost like buying an insurance policy. As you know, most service clubs, including many Rotary clubs, earn money throughout the year by selling things. They have stands at the football game, they have stands at other festivals and so forth, and they sell items and sandwiches and goodies to raise money to fund their projects in the year. Well, in this horrible year of the pandemic, of course, none of those things have been able to occur. We have our birthday fund, so we have continued to receive money into the birthday fund to help us fund our tremendous scholarship program and all of the other things we do. Now, I know all of you have not participated in this, and I think that you've really missed an opportunity. And I would hope that you would, on your birthday, contribute at least the amount of your birthday years and round up to 100 if you can. But if you cannot, contribute what you really can, and this will even make you have much more of a happy birthday.
October 11th, Willie Larkin. October 14th, Bob Block. Also October 14th, Jerry Thane, who shares this quote from Gore Vidal. 50% of Americans did not vote and 50% do not read newspapers. Ideally, those would be the same 50%. October 16th, Laura Gallagher. October 17th, Dortz Dorthbach, who says, birthdays are good for you. The more you have, the longer you live. Now, thanks to all the celebrants for their contributions to the Madison Rotary Foundation. Please join me in wishing them a happy birthday. Joe Luenas will play Happy Birthday on the cello. So thank you very much, Joe. Appreciate that. On to members in the news. So my member news items today features a familiar name, Andrea Kaminsky. Now, Andrea served as our club president last year. She has been a member since 2013 and previously served as executive director for the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin, retiring in 2017. The news item about Andrea is that she has been appointed to 11-member, nonpartisan, independent citizen redistricting commission, which was created by the Dane County Board of Supervisors. The commission is tasked with submitting at least 3 draft supervisory district maps to the county board no later than next May 31st. Where for background, the League of Women Voters, she will make an excellent member of this commission. This is a great example of giving back to the community after retirement. So thanks, Andrea, for your service to the community. So today's program, our speaker is Lee Rasch, who is a Rotarian in La Crosse. He founded LeaderEthics-Wisconsin in 2018 and served as the organization's executive director. He previously served as president of the Western Technical College from 1989 to 2017. Throughout his career, he has actively promoted leadership development, continuous improvement, economic development, and sustainability at the national, state, and local levels. He has written articles and given numerous presentations on these topics. Lee was chair of the legislative committee for the Wisconsin Technical College for more than 15 years. He holds a doctorate degree in education from Illinois State University. So that's from Illinois, okay? So Lee talks about ethical leadership in the American democracy, and he is joining us today via Skype. We look forward to your presentation, Lee, and we have a contribution to the Rotary International Polar Plus Fund. As what I say, thanks for speaking to us today. If you have questions for Lee, use the chat feature, and I'll be watching it, and we'll ask some questions after his presentation as time allows. Lee?
Well, thank you for this opportunity to present of ethics in the American democracy. And even though I'm going to be talking about elected officials, this program is really about leadership. So I'd like to start out with a short video message that was a C-SPAN awarded video by a senior from Green Bay, Wisconsin, Conacher.
And we're featuring the winners of our Student Cam documentary competition. Middle and high school students created videos answering the question, what issue do you most want the 2020 presidential candidates to address? Our second prize High School Central Award goes to Trevor Conaher, a 12th grader from Bayport High School in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where C-SPAN's available through Spectrum. Their winning entry is titled America's Digital Divide.
I really asked myself the question, what's the fastest way to destroy a democracy?
At least one person is dead and several are injured tonight after protests and counter-protests turned violent.
The great divide in American politics shows no sign of closing. Many now questioning whether their information is truly safe on the social network.
I think the fastest way to destroy a democracy is to poison the information.
Within America today, there is one issue that supersedes all others. Not only as a result of the physical ramifications, but because it simultaneously stifles sincere discussion, agitates hostility, and corrupts our culture. This issue is political polarization, the animosity that emerges from it, and the role that social media has in generating it. It would be disingenuous to suggest that political polarization hasn't existed since our nation's founding. But as a recent Pew Research study suggests, this ideological chasm is only widening. In 1994, only 21% of Republicans and 17% of Democrats held a very unfavorable view of the opposition. By 2016, those percentages had become the majority, 58% and 55% respectively. The sentiments that emerge from such antipathy are increasing as well, developing an inaccurate characterization of the political parties and the people that represent them. So what is the source of this unnecessary partisan division?
It's hard to get good political information given the way the media covers politics these days. I mean, to cover something in 30 seconds or even a couple minutes, that's really hard. Most of the issues we're facing are really complicated.
I think at this point the genie's out of the bottle, right? Like the internet exists, social media exists. I think the problem is when it's used, for negative purposes, not to bring us together, but instead to tear us apart.
With the growing importance of social media in politics, what aspects of these platforms contribute to this divide?
The problem that I have with the social media is when it's censored or regulated, and that shouldn't be. The media should present the facts and allow the consumer to make their choices.
One of the problems we have with a lot of the social media and a lot of the news is it encourages people to stay within their own little bubble. And you never see anything again which may challenge any preconceived notion.
With the media, it's become an economic issue. In order for them to sell subscriptions, compete in this rapidly advancing 24-hour news cycle, they have to sensationalize.
The issue goes much further than the design of social media platforms. They are also vulnerable to political consulting companies like Cambridge Analytica, who maliciously steal and manipulate users' data.
Cambridge Analytica sought to identify mental vulnerabilities in voters and worked to exploit them by targeting information designed to activate some of the worst characteristics in people, such as neuroticism, paranoia, and racial biases.
I think protect their data, yes. I mean, that's a huge issue, right? Like, we know Cambridge Analytica as an example. We know that they went after a subset of people. So they went looking for a population for which they could manipulate. And that's a huge deal.
I think if you only see ads that expose you to things that you already like, you never see a contrary viewpoint, it could be really problematic. It could give you a biased understanding of issues, but it also could just totally shut off another viewpoint.
And I always encourage people to do that. See the amount of data they have on you, the things you like, the things you've commented on. From that, you could build a pretty comprehensive profile of a bunch of people, in a sense, to change people's minds.
It's apparent that our culture's continued reliance on social media and the very nature of the platforms themselves has contributed to this political antipathy. So, what are the ramifications? How do we minimize them?
As a way of starting off class, I say, is gridlock good? A lot of them are super frustrated by the lack of attention on issues that are important to them. And then when they think about it, they're like, maybe that's a reflection of the division that exists in the country, or maybe that leads us to a better outcome down the line. Maybe it slows us down a little bit.
There are things being said that just absolutely turn people off, and there are things being said that absolutely turn people on. As a result, We've got more people engaged, more people listening, more people developing opinions, and that's only going to be better for this country. There was this notion that the loyal opposition was the loyal opposition sort of thing, right? That, you know, even if people don't agree politically, we all have the same goal. We all in theory are moving in the same direction. And it's only been fairly recently that I feel like that has been, I don't want to say broken, but that has, you know, that notion is fraying some. I think the most important word in this interview actually is the word listen. You know, I was told one time, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them proportionately. And I think as a society, we tend to fail. We tend to fail in doing that. I think the second thing is the social media environment is when we allow the loudest voices to be dominant in the debate, it leaves, there's no air for any sort of meaningful dialogue.
Despite the ramifications of political polarization, one aspect remained clear throughout my research: the importance of respect, the ability to listen, and the willingness to challenge our own beliefs. As Andrew Breitbart said, politics is downstream of culture. Our culture, more than ever before, has existed solely within the digital realm, a realm that threatens to divide our country along ideological lines. That is why this issue is so significant, because only us, the people, have the power to solve it.
You can watch each winning Student Cam documentary online at studentcam.org.
Thank you for allowing me to provide that video message. I like it for a couple of reasons. I think Trevor Conacher does a wonderful job in presenting the issues, but it's also great that he represents next generation leadership. So I'm going to talk about LeaderEthics-Wisconsin, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that's committed to promoting ethical leadership among elected officials. Next slide, please. And we believe that ethical leaders demonstrate 4 characteristics consistently. They're truthful, they're transparent with public information, they're unifiers rather than dividers, and they worked hard to represent the collective interests of their entire constituency. Next slide, please. Furthermore, we recognize that ethical leadership is not tied to any particular political party, nor is ethical leadership performance directly tied to legislative policy. In fact, you can be very passionate on one side or the other of a legislative policy, but we're looking at the way you approach that following those 4 characteristics. Next slide, please. This is another slide from the Pew Research study that shows what's happening in the United States at this time. And if you look at this graphic, it shows how in 1990, the median Democratic and Republican positions were really fairly close, and still fairly close in 2004. And look at the trend and where things were in 2014. Next slide, please. And then you can see where we are starting in 2017. The majority of the individuals in both parties are pretty far apart and very little middle ground. Next slide, please. So Pew also wanted to find out, are there other variables that are causing this growing political divide? And so they looked at factors such as race, religious attendance, education, age, and they tracked that over that same period starting in 1994. And they found that those factors really weren't variables, significant variables at all. The one significant factor was political party loyalty. Next slide, please. So here's a couple of questions that we're asked frequently. Aren't elected officials representatives, not leaders? And why do we focus on ethical leadership? Well, first of all, we believe that elected officials are role models, for good or bad. And that's why we really focus on their activities as role models in that capacity. Secondly, why do we focus on ethical leadership? Well, a lot of this goes back to my experience before I came to Wisconsin as a senior leader at a large community college in the Chicago area. It was a great school in lots of ways, except there were some problems of conflict internally. You've heard the term political silos, where you have people at the top of the organization are conflicted, and then in the middle of the organization they're also conflicted, and then people on the front line are also conflicted as well. And I wanted to learn more. Why is this occurring, and what can we do to try to avert that? And my research came down to really understanding the important role of leaders, particularly senior leaders. Leaders can set the direction. They can set the compelling vision, establish the things that are important for all concerned in an organization or community, and things that will benefit everyone. They can also reinforce collaboration or reinforce teamwork if it's in an organization. They can also take steps to try to address negative activity that's occurring, maybe even removing individuals if necessary. Here's one of the things that the studies show, that if leaders get to conflict or this gets all off in many different directions, essentially we're finding ourselves debating the facets of health. And we're not addressing the source of the problems, and certainly we're not focusing on solutions. Next slide, please. Now think about this. We value ethical leadership in business and healthcare and education. The book by Jim Collins featured those high-performing companies that had been succeeding at a high level for a long period of time, and all of them were considered to be led by what they call level 5 leadership, character-based leadership. The Malcolm Baldrige National Award addresses high-performing companies and organizations, and in order to win that award, you need to be in the 4th band, the top band of ethical leadership. And then there are many individuals and companies that are embracing the servant leadership approach to trying to develop leadership within their organization. If you think about this, when you are doing business in your community with a company or organization, ethical leadership. You expect ethical leadership from the school administration where your children may go or your grandchildren may go. The areas of business and education and healthcare, we expect ethical leadership. Sometimes it's not delivered and we're disappointed, but that's our expectation. Every area except the political arena. Next slide, please. So what can you do? Well, here's some suggestions. Next slide, please. There are some large-scale things you can do. Here's an example from North Dakota. North Dakota has their government is dominated by a single party, and they've had poor ratings nationally in terms of transparency, and it's resulted in a number of problems. In fact, they were ranked near the bottom of the 50 states in transparency. And so some citizens came together to try to do something about that. And they call themselves the badass grandmas of North Dakota. These women had backgrounds and experience with both political parties, but they were determined to try to do something about this issue of transparency. And through a series of public conversations and coffees and church meetings and so on, they pulled together a plan to amend the state constitution, including the formation of the State Ethics Commission. This was in early 2018. Now you can imagine, the incumbents weren't too eager to chess, certainly not with a constitutional amendment. So in leading up to the fall campaign, this amendment was outspent 20-1 by those that wanted to maintain the status quo. And yet, in the fall of 2018, the amendment passed. And it's a good example of what people can do when they are passionate about something that is truly important. Next slide, please. But not everything is large scale. In fact, one of the things that we have been working on with LeaderEthics-Wisconsin is the formation of a 2020 Citizens Guide, practical suggestions and things that any citizen can do to try to promote ethical leadership in their community. And you can get printed copies here, but I would encourage you to save the postage. Just go to the website and you can link it and download it and have it for free. Next slide, please. Now, here's just a few examples of things in the Citizens Guide. We take those 4 principles and we have suggested questions. If you're going to do a candidate forum or if you have a chance to meet with an elected official, these are questions you can ask them to kind of get a sense of where they're coming from. For example, you can ask, if you are elected, how will you represent your entire constituency, not just a simple majority that voted for you? The Citizens Guide also offers suggestions for countering disinformation. We encourage people to be very cautious about the things that they like and share. We offer suggestions on identifying potential misinformation sites that may be coming to them. In fact, I encourage people to, when you see a post on social media that is questionable, rather than debating on that post, I choose, in my case here, to put in the comment section something like this. I'm aware that many posts are put out there by media organizations that are truly just a facade, and their primary purpose is to try to divide Americans. And if I sense that to be the case, I choose not to like or share that information. Now, if I take a step like that, I'm not going to out-debate the internet. But there are people who are also on social media that are true friends or family members. I've received comments back from them saying, thank you for sharing that example. I hadn't thought of these things in that way. By the way, one of the things in the Citizens Guide, we just strongly encourage, if you have an elected official who's working hard to follow those 4 principles, thank them and support them. Next slide, please. We also encourage you to learn about other organizations. Most other organizations that we are tracking here, they're not focusing on ethical leadership, but there's so many things that are involved in trying to advance the integrity of the American democracy. These are some of the organizations we encourage people to track. Braver Angels will encourage civil conversations between people who have strong beliefs in the conservative arena as well as the liberal arena. And they're basically trying to help people to better understand how to be better at understanding how they communicate and be better listening to people who have different opinions. The other organizations, and I won't go through each of them here, these are things that you can bookmark and in fact, or you can follow them on social media, for example, on Twitter, and you'll get information. It'll come up periodically. Maybe you won't have time to deal with all of the suggestions and the information they present, but sometimes you'll find something here that really strikes home. And so use the social media to your advantage if you can. Next slide, please. We strongly encourage our members and supporters to follow these 2 websites. They are designed to try to give insight on the media and where they rank in the spectrum of liberal and conservative or integrity. All sides, they identify and rate over 800 media source ranging from conservative to liberal views. They will also occasionally take a story and give you the conservative, moderate, and liberal perspective on the same story, kind of getting a 3D view of that. They also ask their stakeholders to rate them as they're going along so that they're trying to be sure that they're not inadvertently showing bias one way or the other on their own. The second site, Media Bias Fact Check, they rank organizations, over 3,000 organizations worldwide. And they too look at the conservative to liberal spectrum, but they view it in terms of conservative bias or moderate conservative bias or least bias and so on. What they're really trying to do is give you a sense of where these media sources fit on the spectrum in terms of their leaning, and they use the term bias. They also identify scientific satire sites, conspiracy sites, and they fact check the fact checkers. Both of these sites, by the way, will readily admit that all media has some bias. And I would encourage, their purpose is not to try to get you to switch your media sources that you're using, but to be better informed and better consumers. Next slide, please. One thing you can do is you can join Leader Ethics Wisconsin, a nonpartisan nonprofit organization. Our membership is $25 a year, and you'll get a monthly issue of the ethics report, which will give you insight on good examples of ethical leadership in practice and some examples that are not so good. Next slide, please. So you might be thinking, what does this have to do with Rotary? Actually, quite a bit. If you look back at the formation of the United Nations in 1945, 49 Rotarians were actually there. They contributed to the formation of the Charter of the UN. In 1946, at the initiation of the New York site of the United Nations, Rotarians provided 250 delegates and their UN employees host homes over the Christmas holidays. In fact, Rotary is designated as an official advisory organization for the UN. And when you think about the Rotary mission of global service, so many of the world's problems are directly tied to unethical and abusive leadership. Next slide, please. Here's some things you can do. You can reach out to the next generation of ethical leaders. You know, I applaud this club because of the things you're doing with encouraging ethical insight development with high school juniors in area. It's really impressive. In fact, Robert Schumacher had a chance to present to a Leader Ethics group last year. You might even consider adding some questions. For example, you could ask a question, why do we expect ethical leadership in business, education, and healthcare, and not in the political arena? You can also invite students to come in and be speakers. Trevor Conacher would be a great speaker, wouldn't he? And there's an organization at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse called the Students for Ethical Leadership Within Government, SELG. We might invite someone like that to come in and talk about what led to their decision. Now, these are political science majors. They're going to be future cadets or staffers. What led to their decision to try to engage in SELG? We also have an organization people in your area to pursue that workshop. Think of this as part of our Votus mission. Next slide, please. But more than anything, your vote is what counts. And vote, because there are many other issues on the ballot, and there are leadership development in the process as well. And I'd like to close out with one final story here. So this is a personal story. Back when I was a freshman taking a psychology class, and I can recall the professor give his lecture, and in my left hand I had a portable ashtray. And in my other hand, I'm smoking. In fact, pain smoking. And I'm not the only one. The air in the class was blue. And at that time, no one believed there would ever be a change in that kind of policy or practice. But it did change. But it didn't happen in a single action or a single action, and happened with many steps along the way. Think of it this way. Today, the political era, but the process for change can start, and it needs to start today with us right here. So thank you for this opportunity to be a part of your meeting today. And if you have time for questions, I would certainly welcome. Thank you.
So with that, I want to thank you very much for an outstanding program, and thank you everyone for attending the meeting, and we are adjourned.